Welcome to the DevReady Podcast, where we're helping non-techs build great tech. Today, we're fortunate enough to be joined by Iain McDonald. He is the founder of 8seats, but has a long history in digital advertising, digital agency space, number of startups across the journey, and has exited to Microsoft at some point. So quite a bit of stories to talk about today. Iain, thank you for joining us. Really appreciate you coming on and spending your morning with us.
Oh, thank you, Andrew. It's great to be here.
Now, Iain, for the audience's sake, tell us a little bit about you, your background, and why you're coming on to the DevReady Podcast talking about all things startups.
Yeah, I'm pretty bit of an old dog in dev and startups and building things. So my career goes back some 25, 30 years. I started one of Australia's first digital agencies. We ended up out of a little Sydney studio building global websites for Disney, Cisco's first interconnected internet homes back in the 2000s. So we rode that whole wave of working with big brands and helping them on that journey with the digital transition. And of course, right now we're seeing more transition than we've probably ever seen before. It happened a bit more slowly at that time. So yeah, big brands working on big projects, sometimes websites, sometimes campaigns, but sometimes actually working on products and devices and interfaces, things like that.
At that time, what did that teach you in the early stages of technology when big brands were just starting to become aware of what they might need to do or sort of coining on and maybe behind us to where they could have been? But it was very early at that time.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, we were very early on, we were having to explain to people what email addresses were even, and then what browsers were like. I remember one night when probably around 99, we were camped out claiming back some of the big URLs that some of the really big companies hadn't claimed in Australia. There was a time there where you could hit the button at 12 o'clock and actually get some of the domains back. So yeah, it was crazy times. I mean, some of the huge brands that we worked with, their very first websites, which were just single pages with the logo on it, all the way through to kind of pretty sophisticated stuff in the end. So it's amazing stories over that time, I can tell you, Andrew.
The claiming back of domains, geez, that would have been a fun period.
Look, I think back in the time, a lot of people were in positions where they didn't know what they were doing. There was a big company, suddenly this thing turned up, nobody knew what to do with it. Sometimes we were talking to marketing people, sometimes we were talking to a CTO, but even the CTOs back in the day weren't really cut out to deal with things like web. Before that had been CD-ROM, quite safe sort of environments, but things being live were a crazy sort of advent for people.
Sounds a bit similar to AI hitting our world and people not knowing what to do with it and trying all new things and nothing working.
It's funny, the parallels I see with that now. It's quite crazy, because with the internet as it came on, it took quite a few years. But what I'm seeing with AI at the moment is just it's actually, for me, I've never seen anything move this fast. It's my job to keep up, and I can barely keep up every night. It's so much hard work. Sometimes it's just wait a month and see what's happened, because you literally can't keep your eye on it. It moves so fast.
No, it's ridiculous how quickly it's moving, and the parallels are when you speak to businesses that are looking to, we need to do something with AI. They're probably a bit stuck. They're probably in the early stages, or we need to do something with the internet or a website. So it feels a little bit like that at the moment.
Yeah, I think I say to most people that you have to have your fingers in it somewhere. There are a lot of really good podcasts you can watch on YouTube, etc., where you can just sort of see the journey evolving, because I think even if you're not using it, you want to absorb the stuff that's going around at the moment. Otherwise, you look back and it feels like too much of a jump to make. So following the journey as much as you can with AI, I think is a really important thing to do. Even if it's just, listening to one or two YouTubers or podcasts, very helpful.
Yeah. It's a good piece of advice, because just catching on as to what's happening around you, because in a month, everything can change. Just looking at images and how they've come, how good they are now compared to what they were a year ago. And movies and videos. Yeah, it's just evolving so quickly.
Look, I mean, it blows my mind how quickly video is getting that much better at the moment. Audio almost seems to be kind of nailed. I mean, doing generating music, etc., is so easy to do. Like it, and I think that's kind of the interesting thing is that AI democratizes a lot of the things that were assigned to really people that had training for a long time. So everything from graphic design, everything audio, etc. There's so many things that people that have no experience in can suddenly at least have their
Start to
foot
do.
in the door with it. Yeah. And it might not be perfect, and I still think audio engineers, graphic designers, they still have an incredible role to play because AI doesn't get everything exactly as you need to get it. So
As people are scared about losing their jobs in the space of or even what might my job evolve to, in my mind, it's always AI will support that skilled
yeah,
person quite well. And co-creation is a word that we need to consider because we are then co-creating. We're not just coming from everything from scratch from a piece of paper and we start blank. So that is the huge advantage that we have.
yeah, I totally agree, Andrew. I used to worry about jobs going. I don't actually worry about that anymore because I'm seeing how AI is just like another team member. It's like another part of the thing that helps you get done more. Like I'm more productive because of AI. It hasn't
We all
displaced
are.
me. I think there
Yes.
was some. Look, it's inevitable that some things are going to get affected by it. But I think in the we actually back in the early days of the internet we used to say. Are people going to lose their jobs? Like, are people going to stop shopping and going to shopping centres, all that kind of stuff? I think
It's
we've,
all relatable, and I'm pretty sure when they first built a machine to dig a hole, that people were scared about losing their jobs. But what do? We build bigger buildings, and
yeah.
that's what's happening in tech. And I think, and that's from what I'm seeing, small businesses probably go further, and there's probably going to be more customization in technology because we can, not because then the costs are less. So there's a lot of that. Things will change and what we do with it, rather than losing jobs. I think just the
I
evolution of how
totally
we
agree.
implement.
There are going to be casualties, but I think
Of
it's
course,
going to
yeah.
create more successes on the other side. But I think the other thing is, if you've got kids, get them on the tools, get them learning it. Like,
Yeah.
this is going to be their next thing. This is their internet. This is the.
Yes.
I say to my kids, you're going to get to tell your kids the story. Hey, I knew what life was like before AI. I
Before
can
AI.
see it now. It's not bad anyway.
Yeah. So, in terms of you've been around startup for a while, I think you
Yep.
mentioned 5 startups after you exited your digital agency. And I think you said to Microsoft, so that would have been an interesting exercise. But
Yep.
we can dig into that, or we can skip that. It's up to you. Um, what's the evolution of startups been like for you? Because it's always evolving, and with technology, we need to shift and pivot. So, what's that been like for you
Yeah.
over the journey?
Well, it's not just startups, it's funding for startups. So a lot has changed in the last 10 years for startups. We didn't have ESOP schemes, there were no VCs, that landscape's still maturing. So even now, just in that whole landscape, it looks very different to how it was 10 years ago. 10 years ago, very hard to raise money at all. No VCs, no ESOP schemes, right? So I think back then, even co-working spaces, we were early days of places like Fishburners, etc. So we're looking a lot better in terms of startups being able to set up and do things. There are grants around, the government's supporting startups a lot more. So yeah, the trying to do it 10 years ago was a lot tougher, that I can tell you. But it's moved a long way. I think we've got a bit of a way to catch up with overseas countries, whether it's the US, EU, even Israel does a way better job supporting people trying to do a startup than it is here. It's a lot harder.
Yeah, it seems like it's a lot harder, and that's the message a lot of people tell you. It's difficult to raise here. Go to the US, but it's a lot easier to raise there if that's the journey that you're on. Yeah.
Yeah, look, I think a lot of VCs here, they say they back early stage seed ideas, but the reality is it's not quite. They might back one or two, but I think a lot of people with big ideas, they expect to walk in the door and be greeted with open arms, but it's like, where's your revenue? Where's your, you've got to fit through a certain cardboard cutout mold to be the right right type of startup. So if you're the wrong type of startup with a very different idea, you're going to get a lot of rejection. So yeah, if you, even we with 8seats, we met with 20 VCs and got 20 no's before we found one that was willing to say yes. So even if you're experienced like me, you don't fit the
It's
right,
still
right
difficult.
mold. It's really, really
Yeah,
difficult. Yeah.
yeah. Let's talk a little bit about that journey of 8seats. Where did the concept stem from? And if everyone at home's listening, you can jump on. You can actually download the app now. I think it's in beta, I believe. It's a visual way to interact with and have conversations with people. Quite an innovative take on how we might have a conversation. I think people used to Slack, Teams. We can set up a little room or a group and talk to people. This gives you a nice little view of, you got eight little heads, which is the concept, but you can expand that. You can turn people on and off and have a chat in terms of a group of three or one, and it's quite simple. I find it quite interesting in the dynamic and how you've implemented that. Probably a visual might be useful for people, but in terms of where did the concept stem from? There obviously is a problem that you found, and it generally starts from there. What was
Yeah.
that for you?
Well, it's interesting. I was doing a lot of strategy for Microsoft back in the late 2008, 2009. And it was a time when MSN Messenger, which I think 9.5 million people used MSN Messenger back in the day, and it just started to decline really, really rapidly because of the rise of Twitter and Facebook. And one of the things that was powering those other networks were like initially small connections, so family, work, friends, etc. They all tend to be born out of your closest networks initially. And I started, so this idea is quite an old idea actually, but I started watching how people talk in real life. So if you think about when you're around a dinner table with, let's say, 8 people, 8 or 10 people, and conversations can move really freely. You know, you're talking to the person next to you, and then a few people join in. So round a table, there are up to, with 8 people, there are 255 different possible conversations. And in real
It's
life, they just
interesting
move around really,
conversation.
really easily.
Yeah,
And
yeah, they
I
do.
kind of wondered why, with things like WhatsApp groups or any groups really, they're very rigid. You just post to the bottom, and everybody has to listen to your chat. And what if it's one person's birthday or one person's away on holiday? How do you deal with that? Setting up other groups, etc. And I actually always thought that somebody would develop a tool where this problem was solved, and it was more kind of lifelike to get through conversations. And we developed a little bit of a prototype and just left it. And in a long story short, nobody ever built this thing that I thought people were going to build. So about 3 years ago, we thought, let's go and build it. We filed some patents. We built a prototype. It tested really well. And again, as you pointed out, Andrew, it's a UI centered design. Like all design thinking, you don't have to type people's names. With your close scripts, you can just tap on heads or swipe left to right, and you're just moving through your conversations kind of as easily as you can do in real life. Maybe not quite as nice, I think. I don't think there's any replacement for the kind of being together, but if there's an expect thing, I hope we can kind of be as close as we can to it. That's our mission, to make conversations as good as they are in real life.
It's an interesting mission because I feel like we're all in that frame of just chatting on Teams, whatever it might be, Slack, etc. And it does. One of the pet hates I have in Teams when I saw your product, I go, this is interesting, is just finding the right conversation with the 2 or 3 people that are in the room and search you. It's difficult. It's not
Yeah.
that simple sometimes when you've got a stream of stuff going on. So I found it quite fascinating as to what you're up to.
Yeah, and I think it's part of a long journey. We have all of these other UI innovations coming. So, but just being able to get to a conversation easily is one of the sort of first things, and we move on from there. We've got all sorts of interesting things that we're going to do, and things like adding AI as your team member, that kind of stuff becomes really interesting as well going forwards.
AI as your team member, let's talk to that because we're all looking at how we might implement components of AI in our business. What does that mean, AI as a team member in the context of 8seats?
Yeah, so we think about AI as just being another person in your team. It's really, really simple. AI can do a bunch of things. It can summarize stuff that you've been talking about. It can make recommendations. So I'll give you one use that we've had already from a couple of customers that have been trialing it. So when you use AI normally, you're sat on your own doing prompts and getting answers, and you go back and nobody's really seeing what you're doing. In our environment, you can have AI as a team member and everybody can see what you're doing. So you can actually work with AI as a team. So a few weeks ago, we had a company that was trying to come up with a product name. They had their whole team and the AI there. They asked AI for 10 names. Then another person said, look, we're a little bit specialist in this area. And then another person came in and said, yeah, but we've got this unique feature. And within 5 minutes, they had come up with a product name that they hadn't been able to do in 2 months, just sat around a table together. So that was a really good, simple example of how...
It's a great example, and I think anyone listening that's started a business, it's not easy to come up with a name. And
it really isn't. And there are a lot of things like that where you're just trying to make a decision together, and then you can have the AI just say, well, what do you think about this? What are some of the key points? Or can you summarize everything we've been talking about for the last 5 minutes into some key bullet points or something? So having that person there is kind of a bit of an assistant, a bit of a brainstormer. It does so many different things. And I think the other thing is that we have the ability to turn the AI on or off. So, our whole system allows conversations to happen. So if you want to have the conversation without the AI, you just tap it and it's not listening, it can't interact. So privacy, data and security are really the kind of heartland. You asked me why we did this stuff. I have concerns about what happens to my data. And I think everyone should have deep concerns. So part of 8seats is just doing the data right, making sure it belongs to you, not somebody else. We don't want people's data as the shorthand to what we're doing.
How do you protect people's data? Let's dig into that, because it's an important piece, especially when you're looking at conversations in business, a lot of IP floating around. At 8seats, how do you protect data?
Look, I think the first thing is it's making sure that messages are encrypted in transit and in rest. So wherever it exists, it's always bolted down. I think the other thing for us as a policy, as a company, like we have no access to conversations. We couldn't look at them if we wanted to. And I think the place that we will go in the future is that I would like companies to be able to host their own messaging data as well, as one thing that we want to do. So keeping it stored safely, and then having that ability to actually take that data as your own. But again, our policies are the other part of protection. We don't use the data, we don't use the metadata. I think you have other companies using and selling that data to make money. That's not what we want to do.
Yep, got it. I think messaging is one area that people are concerned about, emails, all that stuff. It's all their general conversations, IP, etc. So it's important. You mentioned that you started this 3 years ago. Is that what you said before?
Yeah, the idea...
Yeah, roughly, conceptually? Yeah.
The idea is about 14 years old, but we really kicked the company off about 3 years ago. There's a lot of, there are a lot of things that we had to make sure before we started the company, even that we could get things like IP protected, those sorts of things. So there's a lot of pre-work when we got the company started,
Talk about the IP protection pre-work, because some people don't even consider this as build stuff and put something out to market. What was the thinking there, and why did you go down that path?
I think there are two main reasons. The first reason is that raising money when you have unprotected IP is very difficult. And the reason that it's difficult is the second reason is that you need to have some form of protection. And getting patents, patent pending, they buy you a little bit of time at least, and they maybe warn off some other people. You can never stop people copying what you do, but at least you've got the right to go and sue them if they do go and do something. So that, in terms of investors' minds is definitely peace of mind. But I think the thing that I'd say as somebody that's been a creative director all their lives through digital is, that it's not just the idea, but that you have to keep building on your ideas. You have to have a roadmap of innovation ahead. That's the thing that really protects you and keeps you ahead of competitors, because they can't copy you I think we see this with Apple a lot, and even Android. They keep iterating and copying each other's ideas, but they've always got a new thing for next season, and having that ability to keep innovating is a really sort of big deal to keep a startup healthy.
In terms of the innovation side, I think it's quite pivotal to any healthiness in a startup. I agree. In terms of a roadmap, though, you mentioned 3 to 4 years. How do you manage that with users? Because it's one thing to have a 3 to 4 year roadmap, but we don't want to be too rigid in that. So how do we really
No,
make that
it's
work when we're working with users? It's
yeah. Look,
important.
I think a lot of startups that we've seen grow, something like Figma, which is really a massive Adobe competitor, even local businesses like Canva, which are now behemoths, right? They started very small with something simple that was usable. So, out of the box, we do messaging really well for teams up to 20 people, even though we have rooms up to 10,000 people. So we can cater for business, bigger businesses, but we're really trying to look after small businesses that have really tight teams that need to get stuff done. So we start there doing one or two things really, really well. And then over time, a product-led growth strategy in startup is you start listening to your customer, you start hearing where their pain points. And I'm sure we're going to get a lot of stuff wrong, right? We're going to have people going, why don't you do this? Where's that? We won't have video calls for a couple of months, those sorts of things. And it doesn't stop people using the app. We've been using it now to run our business for 5 months, so we know it works. But I think that thing of listening to your customers is the critical path for any business. If they're the real people that tell you what you need to build, you can have your ideas, your 4 year roadmap, but your customers tell you which bits you should be doing on your roadmap first, I think.
Yeah, I agree with that. And you mentioned you're looking at smaller businesses and smaller in teams, which makes sense because the concept is a visual interaction. So it's hard to put 20, 30, 50 people on a screen and squash them in. How do you lift
Yeah.
heads? It's a bit difficult, right? So it will be targeted more at those smaller teams, but you might find iteration as to it becomes teams just inside businesses rather than globally use 10,000 people. Yeah.
Look, I think a product like Slack only allows 8 people in a conversation before you have to turn it into a channel.
Yeah.
Agile squads are, up to 10 people max, right? So even big businesses are broken down into smaller teams all the way
They
through
are. Yeah,
leadership teams.
correct.
So we already have a customer that has around 900 staff looking at using our platform. So we're not limited to small teams, but what I would love 8seats to do is be a bit of a champion to small business, because I think a lot of small businesses use email, WhatsApp and calling, and there are concerns businesses have with their data with some of the other platforms. Where's it going? And owning your own data allows you to do other things in the future. Although the one other thing that I thought was that I didn't know when we started this journey is with staff in businesses. The data that we have says that 70% of people don't want to use WhatsApp for work. It's their personal space.
It makes a lot of sense. Yeah. I've never been a fan of WhatsApp, but yeah, when I deal internationally, you get a few more people with WhatsApp.
Yeah,
Locally, it's still hit and miss, not too many.
look, I think WhatsApp's a really, really good product. It's almost a universal kind of calling, messaging tool for everything that's not SMS. But it was never designed to run businesses. That's something different. So I'm kind of hoping, whereas you've got Slack and Teams that service the big end of town, 8seats is really for people with no IT skills. Like if you don't have, Slack can be quite overwhelming for some people. So, I hope that we can kind of bridge that gap. WhatsApp's great because it's really easy to use. So hopefully we fit somewhere in the middle there, and it's just easy for businesses to have a messaging tool where they own their data, they can do things really, really quickly, and you don't really need to have any training to use it.
And what drives you to continuously work on startups and be around this space and try new ideas and concepts? What's the thing that gets you up in the morning? Because you're full of energy, there's a lot of passion there, but there's obviously passion being evolved over time in different areas and different businesses. What gets you up in the morning?
I think my wife says I've got the mental age of a sort of 14-year-old still.
I
I
love
love
it.
I love building things, like I think my whole life I love creating things. I don't do it for the money. I definitely do the money bit for investors, and you have to make money to run a business. But the thing that keeps me going is I love building great products. I love solving problems. And geez, there are a lot of problems to solve when you start to run a business, and all sorts of problems. I love solving the creative problems. That's just me. I love doing it.
So in the context of the 8 seats, are you focusing more on the visual interaction, the UI UX, or is that team, or where does that sit for you?
Yeah, it's a little bit of all of the above. Like, from
Okay.
everything, like the brand is actually a really important part of a business. So we actually have a kind of cool, quite retro themes, like if you think about old brands like Atari and stuff like that, we've sort of gone a bit retro with our theme. And I love, getting the visuals right. So the usability, the flows, but all up, the most important thing is you've got a product that people actually want to use and they
Yeah, that's
enjoy
the
using.
exciting part, right? It's
Yeah,
when people enjoy using your things that you're putting out into the world. That's what sort of energizes us, I believe, in terms of yes, we're
yeah,
getting feedback, we're good, bad, and indifferent. At least we're getting people some stickiness, and I feel like that's the thing that drives people when they get really involved in startup. It gets a bit frustrating at times too. Some of the frustrations might be, okay, we're not getting enough traction. Why is that? Go back to
yeah.
your current users. Generally tells you quite a bit.
Yeah, look, I think there are so many layers to getting a product right. And you do have to listen to customers intensely. The negative feedback is actually more rewarding in many ways than the positive feedback. The negative feedback tells you what you need to do. So
It does, yeah.
for me, I'm not like if somebody tells me something's wrong, I'm actually happy at that point. Like I know what to do, or I know where the pain point, and I know how the
Yeah.
next batch of people that use it will improve it. And you look at an iPhone 15 years ago when it came out in 2006, right? What it looks like now. That's a process of listening, evolving, and you just repeat cycle on those things. But listening is a really imperative thing. If you think you know better, you don't. And I know in the next couple of months I'm going to get a whole load of people that say, "Oh, that thing over there, it's terrible, and we thought it was a really good idea," and it was like, "Oh, we're going to have to go and change that." But that's part of the fun.
Oh, it's about how do we support more people, and we need to really solve for more problems, right? So, like you said, it's good direction. The feedback it gives you a focal point as to where might I put my energy and attention,
Yeah,
rather than here's a roadmap, just keep builds, but we don't know what's hitting the mark. Sometimes I find in the world of startup or any new product, people can just get in that whole process of just building feature after feature after feature after feature after feature
yeah,
and not really paying attention to what people need. And sometimes more this doesn't mean any better. More can be more distraction, more noise rather than focus. So how do we stay focused? You mentioned it earlier. 1 to 2 things do that really, really well, and
yeah.
then iterate on that because it's never going to be perfect, is it?
Yeah, we normally have to. I mean, we've got our roadmap. I'm looking at it this morning, and we have 168 things that we want to do, but we've got to pick three. We've got to pick
It's
three and
tough
work
to
on
pick
that.
three on that, isn't
During this time, you've got bugs and other things
Yeah,
that you've also
yeah.
got to do. So, look, I think for most businesses, there's always going to be a never-ending laundry list of stuff to do. Like
It
you
doesn't
can't
stop,
work
does
your
it?
way around that. So, it can be really tough making a choice of which things you've got to work on, knowing that there's still important things to come. And again, that can be guided by sometimes it's customers, but other times it might be a gut feeling as well. I think Steve Jobs, when some of the times he spoke, it was like, look, he had some inner voice that was just saying the thing that we need to do to get to the future. You can't connect the dots looking past. You can only look at it in hindsight and see that they're
That's true.
connected. So I think that's the thing that, real innovators actually get, that the data doesn't always tell you what you need to do. And sometimes you've got to make this leap of faith to do this thing that you think is right. And that's kind of some of the exciting part. We've done that a little bit with 8seats, coming up with a UI, a different thing in a messaging landscape, which is just saturated. Nobody needs another messaging app. So it's a bit of a leap of faith. Hopefully there's a bit of data there as well, but you have to trust something to do new stuff. And sometimes that's just a feeling inside.
Yeah, the feeling can be fascinating, and it's predictive as to how. I find that when you're working on product, it can be sometimes you got to put yourself in the seat of the end user,
Yeah.
and what might they have a problem with, and sometimes thinking through that is a gut feel, and then that's the early stage of product, right? Gut feel. Oh, I don't know if they're going to hit the mark on this. Does this really make common sense when they want to click on this? And we're just trying to make it as simple as possible. But you're never going to get it right all the time, and that feedback will help iterate it anyway.
No, you know what? I remember we worked on some of the early touch interfaces for Microsoft when they brought out their big Surface tables, actually before the iPhone, and
Nice.
we quickly saw that things that we do now, like one gesture that we all use would be pinch zoom to make a picture bigger. But back in the day, before, if you put a new user on a touch interface, they would have no idea that pinching and zooming did anything. So you have to use a combination of education, like so little graphical on-screen things to get people through, to take people on a journey, but other times people do the most bizarre things. So I think a lot of technology, we see a lot of things that could be done a lot better, but they're dumbed down so that they work for a lot more people. So you see a whole broad way. There are a lot of ways to do things, but if you want a product to work for everybody, you have to make compromises sometimes, and sometimes that can be good. Making something simple is a lot harder than making something complex a lot of the time.
Yeah, simple from the user's perspective is not easy. No,
Yeah.
in terms of can we get 1,000 people in a room and 999 understand what's going on? That's difficult. Yeah, that is
Yeah,
not
well, that
simple.
was that was one of our design challenges, really. Like, how do you give 8 people access to 255 different conversations without having 255 buttons, right? So that's kind of some of the reductive design that we
Which
did
is the
when we
problem I have
came.
in Teams. So yeah, it's a
Yeah,
good
that's
problem to
right.
solve.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's fascinating. In terms of in 3 to 4 years' time, where do you imagine 8seats might be? What's the vision for you? Is it still small business impact, or what's it look like? The
Well,
evolution of this product.
I hope people love what we're building. I hope people are sort of standing behind saying, we really like what you've done. This filled a gap in our lives. You can talk about business success, but I think product success brings business success. Naturally, I hope that we do well, that we can grow, that there's possibilities, because the more successful we are, the more money we can put back into building the thing and doing all of the crazy ideas that I want to do. For me, like because I've got so many startups behind me, that I would like to think that this is the startup that is my last startup. We're actually building a product, not a platform, not a product. So a lot of startups, you go in and you're building something in one vertical, like that, building something in a messaging space, which we hope. One of the things we want to do is we want to unify messaging. Like, it shouldn't just on with 8seats. You should be able to speak to people on other platforms in the same thing. That's one of the things I really want to do. So hopefully there is business success. You want that for your investors. I hope for product success, that people love the product and they want to keep using it.
If they're loving it and keep
Put it that
using
way.
it, their business success will come. That's
Yeah.
generally how it stems from. So it's a fascinating evolution of a market that we've seen. and been a part of in messaging it everywhere. So it's quite an interesting piece of IP that you're driving there. It'll be fascinating to see where it lands because it could be in a social setting that I think it could expand beyond a business setting. And I think that's probably
Yeah,
where you'd like to get it to at some point. But yeah, starting business B2B makes sense because quicker to impact.
we um we have a lot of family groups and friend groups that are already using this because those
Interesting. Yeah.
scenarios where in a family there's the annoying uncle or something you just want to tap their head out of the group and you can't do that in other apps. So we know there are applications for that. Obviously, as a business, you have to build something. It's very hard raising money to do a consumer proposition.
It
Consumers
is.
aren't going
Yeah.
to spend. So we have a free app. It's free for everybody, and there's a very very low cost solution for kind of our pro version of 8seats as well. So we want to make it accessible to everybody, and hopefully people see value in the stuff that we've put in the pro version to kind of upgrade when they need to. But our hope in the early days is that kind of small. Remember, Australia is the heartland of small business. Like 90% of employed people work in a business that's 1 to 20 people. It's
Which is a perfect target market. It's almost the whole market for to
yeah,
go after. Yeah. So
yeah, and if we can help them improve their businesses and kind of create winning cultures, and I think one of the other things we saw with Teams and Slack and some of the other products is if you're using those, it's a great internal tool. It's very hard to connect to your customers. So with 8seats, you can add your customers into the app as well. So hopefully that'll be another cool thing. And all the
that's
business,
brilliant.
all the data owned by the business. So, but yeah.
Iain, thank you for coming on and sharing the journey today. Let's catch up in a year or so and check in,
Would
see how
love
things
to.
are tracking because I'd love to see the journey because, like I said, it's very unique in a saturated market. So it'd be fascinating to see how
Uh,
you go and with this leap of faith because it is a big leap of faith when you go down this path. So congrats on
uh,
taking that and good luck with it all.
really appreciate it, Andrew, and I'd love to see you in another year's time with some different stories.
Yeah, and if anyone wants to get a hold of Beta, where can they find that? Just
Oh,
on normal app
yeah.
stores.
Number 8seats .com or search for 8seats on the App Store, and hopefully it'll be a nice, easy user sign up journey.
You'll get some feedback and you'll evolve it, so it's
Please keep the
okay.
feedback coming. That's very valuable. If there's one thing people can help me with, is install the app and send some feedback. It really helps
Thank you,
start that.
Ian. I
Yeah.
appreciate. Yeah, thank you. Thanks for coming with DevReady Podcast, and good luck with it all.
Thank you so much.